All right, let's go in and start with some keyframe animation. Here I am back in After Effects, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to delete all this. So actually, let's make a new canvas. I'll go to File. I'm going to click Close Project. I'm not going to save. We're going to start from scratch. So sometimes you'll need to start with a comp or start with some footage. For a few of these exercises, we're going to start from scratch. We're going to click the new composition button, and we want to set it to HDTV 1080 29.97, so that's 1920 by 1080, 29.97. So we're working on video resolution, high definition. So we've set that correctly. And click OK. Here's our canvas. And what we're going to do is we're going to create an object to use in our animation. We're going to create a perfect square. Let's set this to fit. I'm going to grab my rectangle tool, set my fill to white, and I want to draw a perfect square. So if I hold down the shift key while I'm dragging, that'll give me a perfect square, right? Now what I want to do is I want to align the square through the center of the composition vertically and horizontally. Over on the right, under Align, I'm going to click the center composition vertically and center composition horizontally. And so now I've set this up. Now let's look at our timeline. So down here I have my shape layer and I have my contents. And there's two things here. One, when you create a shape, every shape has every object in your After Effects project will have these transform properties. And in addition to that, I have separate transform properties for the rectangle itself. So I have the rectangle, and I can modify the path, the size, position, roundness of the rectangle itself, or the shape and stroke and so on. Now, what I can do here right now is I'm going to work with the transform properties for the shape. I'm going to come down here, and let's go through these transform properties. So one is the anchor point. So if I click on that time signature, then I'm doing this over time. I'm going to delete that. So any change I make, if I grab my behind anchor point tool and move that to the center of the shape, that's going to allow me to adjust that anchor point. I can also adjust the position, the scale, or the opacity of the shape over time. So let's do something simple. I'm going to look at the timeline. I'm going to find 1 second. And I'm going to set a keyframe for the opacity by clicking on the little stopwatch. Now, once I've set that keyframe, you can see the keyframe has been set. I'm going to drag the timeline to the beginning of the movie, and I don't have to click the stopwatch again. After I set that initial time, that initial keyframe, I can add as many keyframes as I want. So I can just click and drag over that and make it say a 0, and now the shape's going to fade on screen. Right? So let's say I want it to fade off screen. I'll go to 2 seconds, and then I'll just grab the opacity and drag that down again. And now I'll start my movie, hit the space bar, and I've got it fading on and fading off. Now, what if I wanted to make it stay on screen for a little while? Well, first of all, I can grab these keyframes and I can reposition. Let's say I wanted the animation to take place much quicker. I can just grab these keyframes and I can drag them over like that, and the animation is going to take place much more quickly. So I can always reposition those keyframes anytime I like. In addition to that, I can copy keyframes. So let's say that I select this one keyframe right here, and I hit Control-C on the keyboard or Command-C on the keyboard. I move my timeline over to the right, and then hit Control-V on the keyboard. And I've made a copy of that keyframe. I selected a keyframe and I copied it. And so now it's going to stay on the screen for that length of time in between, and I can grab those keyframes and I can drag them around anytime I want. Now you have to be careful. If I start this animation and I put a bunch of edits in here and then I click that timeline the stopwatch again, it's going to erase all the keyframes that I've made. So I can select the keyframes and undo that. Let's add them back in. I can copy keyframes. I can select the keyframes. I can select the keyframe and delete it. If I click this keyframe and delete it, it's not going to fade out. It's going to stay on. I can copy and paste keyframes, and I can transition through my animation using these types of concepts. So that keyframe is an important part of how you will do everything in After Effects. And the idea is that you set a transition point, and then you move the timeline to another place, and then you set a second transition point, and it's going to transition through one of the other properties. Now, the other thing here, when we close all this, is that I can call up those keyframes different ways. One is if I hit T, that'll bring up opacity. If I hit T again, it'll collapse it. Let's see what else. If I bring up A for anchor point, right? I can bring up P for position, right? And then I tap P again to close it. And I can tap S for scale, and that'll bring up the scale. And so that becomes really helpful when you're working, when you want to just isolate one element on the screen and just edit that one shape. So those are some things that you'll want to think about when you're doing your animations. Let's stop there.